We're going to do something that I haven't done since, I think, 8th grade history, which is straight up copy somebody else's homework. Nate Bauer joining the show to talk about his article over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. 3 players in Penn State's bowl development that are critical to take the next step into 2022. It's an awesome topic. It's an awesome conversation topic as well. So we're doing it here on the show today on the BWI Daily. Nate, thanks for having a great idea. I'm absolutely going to pirate it like it's a movie in the 2000s.
Take it, buddy. Take it and run with it. It is broad, right? Like,
yeah.
I limited it to 3 because I ran out of time. I could have made it 8, 10.
Oh yeah.
Like that's just what you kind of see on Penn State's offensive side of the ball in particular. Like, and it's not because there's a rash of players who are leaving or who are graduating or who are going to the NFL early. It's because the offense wasn't very good this year.
Yeah, and all of those young players that you haven't seen, there's an opportunity for literally every position for somebody to step up and be the next guy at that position. So,
100%.
What made you pick the 3 guys? We'll get to them and we'll talk about them individually. But what made you narrow the list to these 3?
So let's go through them real quick. It was Malick Meiga at receiver, Christian Veilleux at quarterback, and refresh my memory, who was the
Landon Tengwall.
Landon Tengwall. And so, I think that a big part of it is that all 3 got some run, right? So like they weren't completely shelved this year. So they got meaningful game reps, which suggests to me that they're already further along in their development and are, I mean, obviously Veilleux was kind of a, you have to do it, right? I mean,
it wasn't necessarily a choice. It was, we have one quarterback that can play. Let's see what he can do.
Correct. Yeah. So because of that, I think that there are very obviously paths to the field for these guys. And it's just a matter of, look, like, let's not act like the next 3 weeks of bowl practices are going to dictate success or failure alone, right?
Yeah.
It's the future. It's the next 3 weeks. It is all of winter workouts. It is all of spring practices. It is all of summer reps. So all of this stuff is important for these guys. But I think given the fact that you get this hands-on developmental instruction from your coaches, right, as opposed to GAs necessarily, or having to do it on your own, which is what most of the summer is, that creates, kind of a crucial element to this, right? Like you got to make the most of it. You got to maximize it.
It's a incremental process, and it's an accumulative one over the next 8 to 9 months, but it's a critical part where if you can put some hay in the barn early, you feel better about the future. And I think that's kind of how these 3, if being fair, is you feel a little bit better saying things about these 3 that we've actually seen play football, as opposed to some of the ones I'm going to bring up afterwards, after we get to these guys, because it's not, as you pointed out, you could have 8 to 10 of them. I limited to just 3 more. We might throw in 1 more on top of that. But first off, if you want to go read Nate's full article, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you can sign up for just $1 for 12 months of access. It's plus content, so you do need to be a subscriber to check out Nate's article. And we're going to have all kinds of that coming up in the next couple of weeks with the early signing period and with some bowl prep and all the stuff in the offseason, the insider information that you can only get from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sign up for just $1 for 12 months. I was trying to do the math, Nate. I can't do math like that. That's fractions and decimals, and you need to know exactly how much that is per day. And it's even crazier per article for the first year, for as much as we do.
I believe this is where you say, for less than the price of a cup of coffee.
No, but we're into fractions of cents at that point. I mean, when it comes to the amount of words you can read for $1, we're now into theoretical math.
For less than 1 grain of rice.
There you go. Now we're talking. Before we get to that, though, some news that broke today. We are going back to the transfer portal. Penn State's second player that's entered the portal, Des Holmes, is our next player who is leaving the Nittany Lions. The redshirt senior has 1 year left of eligibility and will be playing elsewhere. This is one of those situations where no one's surprised by this. But I guess the only question I'm wondering is, you would say in this point, Penn State's losing depth at a critical position along the offensive line. But even when they weren't good at it, it's not like they were using their depth, Nate. Is it surprising that they didn't do that, kind of looking back on the year with the way the players that played executed?
Yeah, and unless you think that it's such a dramatic step back or drop off in performance, then what options do you really have? Des is interesting to me just because he came on so early in his career. He was a guy who James Franklin literally, pointed out in a preseason practice, right, as having done some really nice things and being in a position to contribute. Like, not this year, not the year before that. The year before that, right? Like 2019, Des was in a position and did some things, right? I mean, he played, he got some run, and then things just kind of went sideways a little bit. I think injuries were involved there.
Yeah.
And then it just never really came back. So yeah, I mean, this is college football now. And if you are not able to produce and to be available, then this is kind of what you're left with.
Yeah, and it's we'll get into some of the guys that we're thinking of let's just start with Landon Tengwall. Let's get right into it, of one of the guys that you think is critical for development along the offensive line, because really, to me, he's the only one. And what you saw from Landon Tengwall this year, limited snaps but good play overall. What was your focus when looking at Landon Tengwall in the development phase?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that very clearly he was a guy who Penn State identified as being close to ready from the get-go, right? Like, as soon as he got to campus, he was in a position where Penn State had some decisions to make as to what they wanted to do with him. And I think, just generally speaking, the overall philosophy is you always want to preserve a red shirt. You always want to have at least 5 years. Not at least, but you want to have the full 5 years for your offensive lineman, just because, as we've discussed here previously, 22-year-old bodies are drastically different from
at that position in particular, right?
Especially at that position. And so that seemed to be what what Penn State was trying to do with him, and did that. Even though I think it became pretty clear through the course of the season that they needed help there on the offensive line. It's just a question of whether or not their true freshman tackle could step in. Well, let's not even call him a tackle. Let's call him an offensive lineman. Their true freshman offensive lineman could step in and outperform a guy who was already in a position to contribute. I mean, I think it was probably a tough call, but ultimately they were able to preserve that red shirt, and down the stretch, he found himself in a position to contribute.
So just some background on some of the numbers that you saw. This one in particular, with Landon Tengwall and his zone blocking grades. This is some of the information we found after the Rutgers game. So this is specific to one game. But overall, his 77.8 run blocking grade was one of the best on the team. 82.6 overall grade. These are all PFF numbers, by the way. One pressure on 81 pass blocking snaps, but I always say terms and conditions apply, because it was a snow game where he came in replacement of Bryce Effner for 2 series, and then a game against Rutgers that did not have somebody that can challenge him at the position he was playing at left tackle athletically, at least in my estimation of the talent that was on the football field. That, to me, is the biggest question about Landon Tengwall, is the development of him as an offensive lineman clearly has been going well. But what position does he play? Right. And he played left tackle this year, but you were saying offensive lineman because it's not just left tackle he was practicing at this year, right?
Yeah. I mean, James Franklin has brought it up previously that he took reps at guard and center, I believe. Right. And so I don't want to I'll get tangled up in the weeds between left and right. But certainly he got some reps at right tackle, left tackle, definitely one of the guard positions, and definitely center. So
yeah,
I think that what a guy like that does is it creates it's a good problem to have, right? You want to have that flexibility so that other guys who might be a little bit more limited in what they can do. Obviously, Penn State likes to have flexibility just in general on that offensive line.
yeah.
Phil Troutwine prioritizes it. He wants those guys to be able to play multiple positions. The more that you have, the more options that you have in finding the right ingredients, the right mix of guys that can be there on the offensive line. However, for him in particular, and we talked about this previously, there becomes a question of whose best assets do you prioritize?
Yeah.
Right? Like who on the offensive line, who do you want to maximize the most, right? Because if you have a guy who can be your left tackle but can only be your left tackle, who is not as good necessarily as somebody else who can be your left tackle and your right tackle,
right?
What do you do there, right? Does that bump out the left tackle who can only play that position? Obviously, you see where I'm going with this, but I think that those are some of the considerations that Penn State has to make as it moves forward, and particularly with this kid, with Landon, it's all right. Figure out what he does best right now.
Yep.
Through especially these couple of weeks is. All right, where does he project? What does he do? And then how does that fit within Penn State's system?
So, the funny thing is there is still kind of, even when you see in coaching, there's not much of a difference between what you ask your right tackle and your left tackle to do. For example, against Michigan, you've got David Ojabo with 11 sacks at the end of the season and Aiden Hutchinson with 13 or 14. I don't know what the total was after the Big Ten championship game, but you need to have pass protectors on both sides. So the idea of left and right tackle is less important in their abilities. It's more important to have two left tackles that can play on either side of the line of scrimmage. But when you do have to make that decision, the most athletic player goes on the left side and the less athletic player goes on the right side for all those reasons of most quarterbacks are right-handed that most football fans already know. But the problem Penn State has, and this is something I've been working on over the last couple of weeks, and we were doing a show on it, and possibly something at BlueIllustrated.com, is they don't have any tackles. To me, when I've evaluated Landon Tengwall, his high school film, now the size is one thing, but to me, his best position would be guard, where I think he could be an NFL player. That's the level of talent he has physically, all Big Ten, all that stuff, and then he plays at left tackle and plays really well. Terms and conditions apply. So I'm willing to be wrong there, but at the same time, what is going to maximize his impact? And you're right about that. I wonder if it's going to be out of necessity that you have guys playing at certain positions going forward, because that's how I kind of feel the offensive line is built this year. So another guy that you didn't mention that I want to bring up with all of that in mind, another guy with a tackle body, is Olafashanu. Why didn't he make your list necessarily? And then he's a guy that we heard about this year. Maybe we didn't see. What are your thoughts on him going forward?
Yeah, he just would have been in second place among the offensive linemen.
Gotcha.
like I said, I mean, there was kind of this undercurrent of conversation through the course of the season about getting young guys in a position to play, right? Because the offensive line wasn't really having a whole lot of success. And so naturally the chain of thinking is, all right, well, if your starters aren't playing that well or somebody's hurt, then a guy that you mentioned in September as having flashed during preseason camp and shown some strides and taken some steps, why isn't he in a position to contribute now, given the predicament that you're in otherwise? And to me, and maybe it's just me, I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
that given some of the challenges that they had and some of the obstacles that they were facing as an offensive line, not just with performance, but with injuries and all of that these guys weren't necessarily ready,
Yeah.
that they weren't viable options to be better than, because look, we get into this all the time. Sean Clifford at 60% as being the better choice than the backup at 100%, right? Without having ever been hit, right? Like
Yeah.
those are decisions that are made constantly for coaches. But given the offensive line and some of the challenges that it saw this year, that Olu and Landon in particular weren't in a position where they felt comfortable playing them, I think tells you a little bit about where they are and what the expectation should be for them.
This is the thing that I don't really know how to answer, and we go back and forth on this all the time. Olu Fashanu is a redshirt freshman on the roster. Do they consider last year a redshirt year, a true redshirt year, or is everyone just designated that, and then guys like Keziah Holmes or Fashanu are actually getting their redshirt development year this year, and it's pushing back their timeline? That's what I don't know how to answer, because it is telling that a true freshman in Landon Tengwall was the guy that they put in at left tackle when everyone was sick. And we don't know Fashanu if he was healthy. I don't know if I have that information, as far as I didn't see him during practice that week, and he was not a guy that I saw getting any reps going into that game. But that when they needed somebody, it was Tengwall, and it stayed Tengwall, and it wasn't Fashanu.
Yeah. It is hard to know. It is hard to know, just given what happened there with that sickness that seemed to really get the entirety of the offensive line. Like, yeah. I don't know how many bodies they had that were ready to play in that game. So, I think you make a good point. I think it's just, last year was in many ways a lost year. It was developmentally. I think that you see that throughout the roster of guys who were true freshmen last year and just they weren't, unless you were actively playing. So a Parker Washington, for instance,
right.
You were getting those quality reps to whatever extent they could be, given the protocols that were in place, but you were getting that in practice. A lot of those other guys, my sense from what I've gathered is that it was not of the value, or really anywhere close to it, as you would expect for a normal redshirt freshman, first year in the program, developmental year.
Yeah. Let's one of those guys we might be pointing to about last year. Let's go on to our next player on this list. That would be Malick Meiga, who Penn State fans are very excited about after his play against Rutgers. Here are his numbers: 4 targets, 3 receptions, 78 yards, and 1 touchdown. 67 of those yards coming on 1 play. So, Nate, what's your thought about Meiga and his role going forward? Because I know that he's a guy you and I have talked about quite a bit over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's just a guy who looks the part. If you see him in practice, he's tall. He looks built. He is fast. He has all of those ingredients that get you excited if you're a fan, or certainly obviously a coach. It's just a matter of him putting it together. And I think that the struggle in terms of expectations for him is, like you said, a 67-yard touchdown where he was standing completely by himself. Right. Most of your receptions in the Big Ten are not going to come that way. And so you have to establish that you can win some one-on-one matchups, and you can beat coverages.
Yep.
And I don't know that we have nearly enough of a body of work to be able to see where he is in that process. But again, here's a guy who they thought, and it appeared as though he would be able to start to contribute early in the season, had a setback due to injury. But once that injury was over, he didn't lose so much ground as to not be prepared to play once he had passed that.
Yeah.
So, really from Illinois on, he was a guy who you saw on the field at a position where they needed it. The wide receivers needed some extra contributors there, some extra bodies to take off some of the the wear and tear of the top guys, and he was a guy who was ready to step in there. So you would have to think that given, what's going to happen with Jahan Dotson after this season, and given some of the needs that they already had there at receiver, that he's in a position that, again, to be able to take advantage of the next few weeks, positions him well for the spring.
How do you view it as a positive thing, as far as you are more apt to believe Malick Meiga is going to turn the corner, or are you still unsure about the unknown? Because that's where I'm struggling to find my footing on kind of the projection going forward.
Yeah, look, things can change. Things can change to the positive or the negative. I mean, that's always a possibility. However, all of the, again, I hate to keep using this word, but like the undercurrent surrounding Malick is he does everything right. He practices hard, he practices well, right? Like if you have that as the framework of being dedicated to the game, studying it, learning the game. He had some hurdles moving from Canadian football to American football that he discussed at length in his interview that he gave late in the season. But if you're coming at it with that approach, then it would seem to be a situation where you're positioning yourself to maximize whatever your capabilities are. And certainly, I think that that they would say that there's a high ceiling for him based on the physical attributes that he brings to the field.
James Franklin said he's a 4.33 guy, but he doesn't believe that 4.33 guys exist, which I kind of agree with. Of like, numbers, the 40-time numbers are always going to be what they need to be to paint a picture of a guy's speed. But yeah, 6'4", 200 pounds. He's naturally big, so he doesn't have to pack on a ton of weight, even though I think he could get up to 215 and you might not notice. But yeah, I've said since the beginning, I'll never not be intrigued by 6'4" and runs that fast. A couple guys that aren't on your list that I think we've talked about before that are truly unknowns, and I'll bring up one name and we'll discuss a couple of them. Liam Clifford we didn't see him this year. Full redshirt year for the brother of Penn State starting quarterback. What is your sense of that timeline and the other players behind the names we know as far as their ability to step in and contribute going forward, maybe not in the bowl game, but in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Franklin brought up Clifford and Harrison Wallace as two true freshman receivers who had played well enough or shown themselves to be far enough along in preseason camp as to I mean, he said that he thought that they would be on the field this year, that he thought there would be more of an opportunity for those guys to play this year. And it just, for one reason or another, it didn't happen. But again, if you've shown enough in your first couple of weeks on campus or months to be a consideration at that position, then I think that bodes well. Right. Yeah. I think that bodes well. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were better or more ready to beat out or complement the guys who were ahead of them. But again, if you can get that seasoning, if you can get that time for development for them to figure it out, it lessens your chance of mistakes that can be backbreakers in games that, let's be honest here, so much of this season for Penn State football was about the margin of error being so slim.
Yep. Which is interesting.
So
it's just interesting, given the two guys you brought up, Harrison Wallace and Liam Clifford. Wallace was the guy that saw the field early in the season, got a couple of snaps. I don't know if he got a target, but he was on the football field. Liam Clifford, from the high school tape, I have much more confidence that he runs routes and gets open. Harrison Wallace just runs really fast and jumps really high. So to me, it like I was the exact opposite of what I was expecting out of which one would see the field sooner. And yet here we are in this situation. So I'm this is the part I'm having a hard time with, Nate, is I used to be the guy that saw something and a trait that I liked or a certain play or something, and then extrapolate that out to an entire profile. The Daniel George thing of, I liked his high school tape. He gets one really good play. He has the longest touchdown in the history of Beaver Stadium, and he's the next guy, right? And then that didn't work out. So with some of these guys, it's really hard to project positively into the future with so many unknowns. But I think with Clifford, my thought is that is one that I do think eventually will turn the corner to being a productive player. But do you feel comfortable with those names and kind of the where they're at in the narrative and the undercurrent, as you've called it, going into the spring? Or does Penn State need to add a guy in the portal possibly as a veteran presence behind some of the guys they have that we've mentioned?
Yeah, look, to behave as though Penn State is fine at really any position offensively, I'm seriously across the board, right? Like, they thought they were stacked at tight end. They thought they were stacked at running back. Receivers fine for this year. Quarterback was fine for this year. Actually, no. Scratch that. Quarterback was not fine for this year. Quarterback was a massive disaster this year. Yeah. They didn't have enough players. They didn't have enough bodies, right? Yeah. In preseason camp, when we saw 3 scholarship quarterbacks, that's not enough. You got to have 4, at least, sometimes 5. So, no, I mean, every position on the field that they go into the offseason with offensively, they should be looking very, very seriously. It doesn't mean that you just take anybody off the street who wants to come play at Penn State. It does not mean that. You don't just hand out scholarships like candy.
And we're not talking about a guy that is like, oh, he was a former 5-star with a lot of potential. Like, they need a guy that's played and knows how to play and that translates to the field immediately. They're not looking for more talent. They've got tons of talent. They need somebody at most positions that has produced. This is the thing that I think a lot of people, this is the narrative about Penn State, is great recruiters can't develop. What you just said, tight end, running back, a lot of preseason talent. Are you buying into that notion? And is that something that's going to change with Taylor Stubblefield and Phil Troutwine at those particular positions and Tyler Bowen now as the tight ends coach? Do you think that is a narrative that's going to shift with the positional coaches, or is that just a thing that's true? I guess, what's your thought on that?
Well, it's hard for me because I hear that, and I think Jahan Dotson is markedly better than he was before Taylor Stubblefield arrived at Penn State. I think that, I think that Ja'Juan Seider has a track record of success, right? Like, before Ja'Juan Seider came to Penn State, Journey Brown was he was a track guy, right? Like, that's what they kept calling him, was a track guy who was trying to learn to play football and did learn to play football. And by the end of really his last game in the Cotton Bowl was dominant. He was really, really good. So, certainly I think that there is evidence to say that, at least from those two guys, they do develop players. They have had success stories. Parker Washington is a success story. Yeah. Phil Troutwine, we have, I think, yet to see that. I'm not sure who you would point to so far in his tenure at Penn State that would make you say, oh man, here's a guy who has not just been serviceable, but has blossomed. Yeah. I don't know that there's a guy individually who we could point to and say that, because Rasheed Walker has not, Caden Wallace has not, Mike Miranda has not, Juice Scruggs has not.
So it's interesting too. I when I went back earlier this season when we were having this long conversation about how bad the offensive line is, and how Phil Troutwine fits into that picture. And I guess I had never gone back and done a lot of digging on his career. This was his 4th year as an offensive line coach. Yep. So there isn't a track record of anything, really. Like, there's 4 years, and that's not even enough time if you're at one place to recruit and develop guys. What he did at Boston College was he took guys that were performing at an average level, and they all performed at an above average to nearly elite level, and you get one guy into the NFL in the first round. That is how you build that profile, but there is no evidence of him recruiting and developing guys because I think I have this right. This will be his 5th year and his 2nd season of full recruiting at Penn State. So I guess the jury is going to be out there, but it's also the same thing of you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like just because one thing didn't go well doesn't mean you blow up the entire thing, which is what you and I are seeing a lot from Penn State football fans is none of this is working because COVID season and then this year, so blow the whole thing up. And then you I don't know. We'll get into that at another day.
People tend to back off of that though at once emotions calm down. Like they're going to get into the off season and hope will again spring eternal. And I think I just look for all of the things that went wrong for Penn State this season, of which there were many, right? Like, and some not of Penn State's fault. You can't dictate injury, development things that you can point at them and say, hey, the coaching staff didn't bring these guys along fast enough. They weren't prepared. They weren't ready. Misses in the portal, what have you, all of those different things. And like, even the media, certainly, let alone fans, were looking at it and saying, man, this is
rough.
Not where the program should be, right? Like what your expectations would be. It's not there.
Yeah.
The worst loss that they had was to the number 2 team in the country at the time by 9 points. Every other loss that they sustained was outside of Illinois, which look, it was what it was, were 3-point losses, 4-point losses, like, including to the eventual Big Ten champion. So how far away they are, I think, is what's up for debate, because you can say that they're not there at a bunch of different places, right? Like it's not like they're one guy away. It's that they are not close enough at all of these different places, but they are close at all of those positions, at all of those shortcomings. It's not like they're so drastically out of whack that some of that ground can't be made up with a little bit more time. It's just a matter of, hey, you got to go do it. And that's why this offseason becomes critically important. I mean, there's got to be a sense of urgency to it.
You can't tread water. You have to take some significant strides forward, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because the defense, I mean, it's going to be in flux. There's no way you lose your defensive coordinator of 6 years and you maintain consistency. That's a high bar to cross. One last guy that actually crosses both sides I want to bring up before we move on to our final guy on your list would be Marquis Wilson. As far as an offensive developmental player, is he an offensive player? Is he a receiver? Is he a defensive back? He spent time at both positions this year. Do we know now where he's playing at Penn State?
We do not.
Okay.
We do not, because he played both this year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all signs, all indications were that he had made the switch to the offensive side of the ball and would be able to help there. He got some reps on the offensive side of the ball, and just the presumption was that he wasn't far enough along to be a consistent contributor at receiver, but give him more time, give him more practice reps, he'd get there.
Do you think he can play both sides? Like, do you think he can moonlight at both positions going forward? Because that's what it feels like. What he did this year was he took some reps with the receivers. He was working with receivers, and then they bounced him back over the corners, and that's kind of where he ended the year. But this offseason, if he put in the time to play receiver, do you think he could play both?
Maybe.
I don't like the idea. Let me just say.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of the narrowing it down, but like the baseball, football dividing your attention kind of deal, right? Like if jack of all trades, and so do you want him to be a guy who can maximize his potential and really bring a lot to the program. And maybe that's for the program. That is what that is okay. You got a versatile guy who can come in and fulfill a need based on whatever it is week to week. But I don't think that. I don't think that that's realistic in today's football.
So I saved the meatiest conversation for last because that's what I like to do. I like to eat my favorite thing on the plate last, so that's my lasting memory. A lot of people like to get to it first, so if we lost you, my bad, you're not listening anyway. Christian Veilleux, the last person on your list, the last player on your list of important developmental players, the most important as Penn State's backup quarterback. These are his stats: 15 of 24 for 235 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a little context for that: big-time throws, turnover-worthy plays according to PFF, 1 of each. So as we talked about, two busted coverages for touchdowns. 1 great throw by Veilleux, and that would be the one to Tyler Warren where he threaded it between a safety and a linebacker. Do you think with seasoning, going back to our food metaphor, he can play part-time in the bowl game? Do you think that's a formula for Penn State's success this offseason?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
let me rephrase that too. The quarterback might be too loaded of a position to talk about, but I was expecting to see more of Landon Tengwall in the final game against Michigan State. More so than just 2 series. And some of these guys, now you're into the bowl season. I know they want to win games because they don't want to go 7-5, but at the same time, I was surprised we didn't see more young guys as the season went on, where you can still preserve those red shirts and get them playing time so you feel better as the coaching staff seeing them physically do it in a game. Do you think that's a value for them in the bowl game?
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely a value that if the opportunity presents itself, if the development happens over the next 3 weeks where they find themselves in a much better position to contribute, then yeah, I mean, I look, there's always this fundamental divide between what fans want, which is moving on, right?
Yeah.
Like out with the old, in with the new, let's see what the new guy can do, versus, hey, you don't want to knock this guy off track by putting them in a position where they can't succeed. And so, it's the individual players' preparedness for this. It's the matchup.
Yeah.
Right? Like who are you facing? If you've got a particularly strong defensive end who is going to eat your lunch, then yeah, you don't want to put the new guy out there to be put in a position to fail personally and to fail the team, right? Like put the team in a bad spot. So no, I mean, I think that these are all of the conversations and all of the decisions that are probably being made literally as we speak when the coaches aren't at in-home visits on the recruiting trail right now. I mean, that's just that it is such a busy month. And that is a huge part of it, is deciding and determining where some of these guys are in their trajectory, right? Like where are they on the path?
Did you see enough from Veilleux that you would believe he has the opportunity to start next year pending Sean Clifford's status going forward?
Yes. I don't think that it would be necessarily ideal for Penn State. I mean,
he'll be a redshirt freshman next year.
Yeah.
And it's not ideal to start a redshirt freshman, but redshirt freshman, it is not the same as starting a true freshman. You've had a full, especially if you're an early enrollee like Veilleux was, where you've had a full year and a half now in the system. Are we overstating that part a little bit? Where you're never going to move on if you always have a veteran option. You're absolutely never going to play a young guy if you always have a Sean Clifford hanging around. And is that delaying your program? Because in the NFL, and I understand it's a different thing, NFL quarterbacks play, and then we find out immediately what they are. We don't wait around 3 years anymore. Is that maybe not? It's not 3 years in college like it used to be, where you're a redshirt junior getting your start and playing whatever. Maybe it's redshirt freshman, your clock is accelerated a little bit. Is that fair?
I mean, wouldn't Aaron Rodgers like he didn't start right away?
Sure, but he was behind a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Okay, Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, I mean, you name it. Like,
Yeah.
there's lots of guys who have gone on to have quite a bit of success that were aided by not having to play right away. It just takes time. Like, I know nobody wants to have that patience, and there are occasional success stories of guys who can come in right away and have success, but
so then I guess the timeline is the question as well. So it is the conversation of, then are you waiting 2.5 years to see Drew Aller on the football field, or Bo Prabula? Is that the future Penn State football fans who want to unwrap their toy week 1? And I'm saying wait a little bit, like, maybe get to week 6 before we start talking about that with a true freshman quarterback. But with a redshirt freshman, who's shown positive signs, this is, to me, in this situation, there has to be at some point you got to leap off the cliff. You've got to bet on yourself. And if you're Penn State and the development of your players, you got to bet on yourself that you're going to have a guy ready to go. I know it's unfair to compare, but in the landscape, you see more redshirt freshmen that succeed if they're a high quality prospect in their first year starting.
Yeah, look, my general outlook on this is that the more experience you have in a guy like Mike Yurcich's offense, the better prepared you are to succeed, regardless of necessarily just pure athletic talent or just pure skill as a quarterback. Knowledge is power at that position.
Yeah.
And so, look, like, again, I mean, we've talked about this here before. I think my understanding is that Sean Clifford will have the choice to come back or not.
Yeah.
I know it frustrates people. I get it. You've seen this program with Sean Clifford, and it has not gotten to the level of success that anyone necessarily wants. However, he did have success this season before he got hurt. He had 2 significant wins against Auburn and against Wisconsin. Had positioned Penn State pretty well in that Iowa game to have success, right? Like, I mean, let's be fair about this. He's not all world, but he's not garbage either.
No.
Like, this is a kid who can play, and so in his 6th year potentially, that there is still the opportunity for him to do good things. And I just think that there are assumptions being made about Christian Veilleux and how prepared he is for that. I mean, look, like, Trace McSorley was at the end of year number 3 in the program before he really got his first opportunity with Penn State, and he made the most of it.
Yep.
Sean Clifford was in year 3 before he got that opportunity. Like,
yeah.
I just, the more time that you have, generally speaking, helps. That does not mean that if Christian Veilleux comes out and is a world beater, makes all of this development between now and then, that you don't go with the guy who gives you the best chance to win.
So that is, and I apologize, I derailed us with that particular conversation. The real question is, if Sean Clifford comes back, does anyone have the opportunity to play other than Sean Clifford? Because if it's a true competition going forward, if you say, okay, Sean, like, we want to have you back, but as always, the best player is going to play. And I don't know that Penn State fans feel that part is true. And I to this point, I think that that's true. Like, Christian Veilleux was not ready to play this whole season. And I'm probably overplaying the card of, he can be ready to play next year, but will he? Maybe by the middle of the season, end of the season, but do you then do that to Sean Clifford? Is James Franklin willing to do that? And that, I think, is the problem, really, looking at this situation,
When Sean Clifford didn't perform well, 2020. What happened?
They put in Will Levis. Yeah.
Correct. Right? Like, if there is any doubt, if there is a problem at that position, if Sean Clifford isn't winning the job, like I understand the argument about loyalty and that maybe James Franklin is too loyal to that position. But I also understand it. I understand what he sees that position as in terms of its role on the field. And so maybe backup X can get you 2 more completions in a game, but doesn't do some other things well enough that Sean Clifford does do well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, like,
You've talked me off the ledge twice on this conversation, by the way.
Well, I don't want to be the guy that like piles on, but Taquan Roberson couldn't get the snap off.
Yeah.
Okay. You have seen some of what can happen when you have a guy who does have ability but can't do other certain things well enough. And so I think that you know what you have with Sean Clifford, and it doesn't mean that he is completely without repercussion if he doesn't play well or if he doesn't do the things that he needs to do. It's just I tend to think that people are kidding themselves that he has established this through his career to this point, and that next year would somehow be any different from that. It's just a matter of his health.
You've the last 2 times we've talked about this particular conversation. Last week, I think it was on a Thursday, maybe it was Friday, and now today. You've talked me off the ledge twice because I'm ready to get on to the next evaluation. Like, I'm ready to see the next quarterback because, fan or not, you want to see great things happen. You want to see something you've never seen before, and you know what you're going to see with Sean Clifford. But you bring up such valid points, and Nate, that's why we have you here. You keep everyone on the train track. So thanks for coming on the show today and keeping this show on the rails.
Yeah, I don't know if I keep anybody but you off the train track. There's a lot of people who are going to be mad at me about this segment, but I just you got to look at it as the gradients of gray that it is. It's not a situation where you can immediately point to the next guy and say, "Oh, these things are going to be so much better. There's going to be no downside." It's always risk reward. It's always these conversations and these decisions that have to be made. And I'm not sure that there's necessarily a right answer. But to the absolute original point, that's why these months, these weeks are so critically important for a guy like Christian Veilleux. Is he can, if he hasn't already, and I think that he has, but if he hasn't already, he can make it a much harder decision. Right? Like, win the job, make it so that it's not a shoe-in. If people are disappointed or have an issue with Sean Clifford coming back and winning the job, maybe the push should be, hey, backup X, whoever you are, whether it's Drew Aller, Christian Veilleux, or Beau Pribula, go win the job. Go be so good that there's no conversation and there's no decision to be made. But I'm not sure that we're going to see that realistically.
Yeah. And to bring up Sean Clifford in this particular show, talking about young guys at this particular position at quarterback is important because it's the context of, does it matter that Christian Veilleux, all of this conversation is a moot point if he doesn't play next year, but to your point, it is. That's exactly what the next 3 weeks and the next offseason and the next 6 months of his life are going to be about. So, Nate, you nailed the dismount. That's the BWI Daily Edition. We'll come back tomorrow. We're talking about the defenders, young defenders we're talking about with bowl development, right?
Yep.
We'll be doing that. We'll be doing that tomorrow, so stay tuned. Another great conversation with Nate Bauer on tap on the BWI Daily Edition. We'll talk to you tomorrow.